You've read the rules, you've created your strategies, you've put in the time, you've done the math. Now it's time to show us what you've got. Welcome to this week's episode of FMA Plus.
This week, we've got Team 3637, the Daleks from Flemington, New Jersey. We've got Team 56, Roby from Bound Brook, New Jersey. 1218, SCH Vulcan Robotics from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Team 1676, the Pascack Pioneers from Montvale, New Jersey.
All right, so first up, we have Team 3637, the Daleks from Flemington, New Jersey. All right, so we're here with Team 3637, the Daleks from Hunterdon Central High School. I'm here with Jacob, Sean, Kevin, and Ryan, the student representatives from 3637, as well as their mentor, Mr. Brokaw. And with that, Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about 3637, the Daleks?
Thank you. As you said, we are Team 3637, the Daleks from Flemington, New Jersey. This year, we are proud to be celebrating our 10th season as a member of the First Family. Since we started out 10 years ago, we have not only grown our team to 77 team members and 23 mentors, we have also started and mentored 3 FLL teams and 6 FLL junior teams. We even hosted our first FLL and FLL junior event called Bot Bonanza, where our team members ran the show from MC to referee. It was an amazing chance to get our community together, and we can't wait to host again next year. Although we are very proud of our team's influence on our community, during this time we would love to talk about this year's robot, as we are very proud of all that we have accomplished.
Very cool. So let's dive into that robot. Ryan, what were your team's goals when you guys started the season?
So when we started the season, we wanted to win a blue banner for our robot this year. That's something we've never done before. So we were really setting our sights high this year. And in order to do that, we wanted to create an innovative robot that could complete all aspects of the competition.
Yeah, that sounds like a fair way to definitely compete for one of those coveted blue banners. Jacob, what did you prioritize in your planning of the robot? What were your priorities?
The main thing we prioritized this year was actually the climb. We knew it was a very high-scoring aspect of the challenge, so we really wanted to put most of our effort into making a climb that we knew could double climb very frequently. Another thing that we had to really prioritize was how we were going to shoot, and shooting high versus shooting low really ended up splitting our team. We really wanted to decide whether or not we should go with the reliability of low shooting or the high-scoring aspect of the high shooting. In the end, we started to go with the low shooting just because we knew that we'd be very fast with the climb, and that low shooting would just benefit us overall. And we also decided to have a short bot so that we could go through the tunnel to add to that maneuverability. And in the end, it was a hard decision, but we ended up keeping the spinner because we knew it would set us apart from other teams.
Yeah, I know when you talk about dividing the team, whenever there's a huge sort of like A or B option in FRC game design, it can tend to be a team splitter. But let's talk about the robot all the way from the ground up. So let's talk about, obviously starting from the drivetrain. What was the most special part of your drive base?
This year, we designed motor plates from our very own CNC machine. They can use both Falcons and Neo motors. And this year we went with 13-to-1 gear reduction for fast speed and adequate power. Our larger drivetrain plates were made by Technotron from our CAD models, and our Robotics 1 class was able to make a trip to Technotron to watch them make the plates. This year we went with 4-wheel drive, but since we had 4 motors, the motors were all spinning at different speeds, and the robot didn't go straight. So we had to calibrate each to solve the problem. Our 4-wheel drive system also produced a lot of scrubbing on the carpet, making it difficult for us to turn. So we added Omni wheels to the front of the robot to allow for easier turning. But since they weren't the same size as the back wheels, the Omni wheels messed up our calibration of the intake system. So in the end, we added Kevlar covers to the 2 front wheels at the recommendation of one of our mentors at Nokia Bell Labs.
Nice. Yeah, sounds like you guys are super resourceful in coming over some of those challenges that come with new style drive bases and new designs. So Ryan, let's talk a little bit about the software. Did you have any programming or any software development to maybe help a drive team member or help to play the game in Teleup?
Yeah, we did actually. So we're very proud of our vision processing system that was on our robot. And it's pretty complicated. It actually did not run directly on the Robo Rio. It ran on a Raspberry Pi that communicated with the Robo Rio through the smart dashboard. And what our vision processing did was identify balls and then track their movement. So it did that by identifying any circular objects that were within like a yellow color range of light yellow to dark yellow. And then once it found it, it was able to calculate the distance to the balls, and it could even track multiple balls at one time. But if you had the robot drive to that ball, it would only go to whichever one was closest. And it would drive to the balls by making an arc, which would to the ball, which would be based on how far left or right the ball was, as well as its distance. And the speed of the robot would have been determined by that distance, so that if as we got closer, we could go slower to make sure we're properly lined up in order to get it. And we were so proud because this was our first year successfully vision processing. But because of that, we definitely had some major problems.
Like what? Maybe you could elaborate. What kind of challenges came with first year vision processing?
Yeah, so one of our major things was that we didn't realize the importance of documentation at the beginning of the season. So we had one SD card set up for our Raspberry Pi, and unfortunately we fried it about halfway through the season, and then we had to set up the whole thing over again and just search the internet to fix all of our problems because we didn't document it, and it took hours. But after that, we learned our lesson and documented everything that we did and made copies of the SD cards so that that wouldn't happen again.
I get the feeling that you guys aren't going to skip that step ever again. So as we get through sort of this robot walkthrough, it says here your ball delivery system involved a lot of trial and error. So can you guys talk about how you got to your current mechanism?
All right, so through our prototypes, we always had horizontal shafts with one side passive and the other active. And through our prototypes, we went through wheels, rollers, polycord, and rollers with zip ties. But our main issue was always friction. So we ended up using two parallel pairs of belts, which carry the ball from the intake to the lowest goal. And we got this from one of our robotics classes, which designed vertical belts for one of the challenges. We have wheels on the ends to grab the ball and shoot it, and this is all controlled by sensors in the front that control when it's activated, and sensors at the end that stops all the conveyor system until activated by driver. Our intake system was well thought out this year with pneumatic cylinders that push the roller out, and it's a single clean roller, and there's angle brackets below the roller to guide the ball to the center of the conveyor. We originally had multiple wheels on a hex shaft, but we changed to tubing to get more pressure. The aluminum tube also had polycord on it, but we found that the balls couldn't slide because of the amount of friction on it.
It sounds like you guys had a very well thought out, very organized approach to not only shooting the ball, but also pulling the game pieces off the floor and organizing them for shooting. So that's awesome. Let's talk about your approach to the color wheel. How exactly do you guys manipulate that? What kind of spinner or mechanism do you guys use for that challenge?
So at the beginning of the year, even though we had decided that the spinner was for us a low priority, it still kind of could end up being like a tiebreaker in a competition. It made us extra competitive. So we thought it was important to have. And so when we were all creating our designs, we always kept that in mind. So our spinner uses compliant wheels to contact the side of the wheel, and it has a 30-to-1 gear ratio powered by a bag motor, which allows us to spin the wheel in about 2 seconds, which we found was like the perfect time. And what's actually controlling it is we have an encoder for the part where it has to go 3 to 5 rotations. And then we put some consideration into it. We thought about doing a color sensor to sense what color it's on, but we decided that it's possible that you could just see the color enough to use that judgment instead of having to add another sensor. In addition to that, we used a 6-inch pneumatic stroke, which allows our spinner device to go to the height of the wheel, which is very important. Being a trench bot, for us to have a spinner, it has to go up, and so it can't just be like a static arm. And we use a lightning bolt-esque design to get around a lot of building and space restrictions. So it allows us to connect more to the side of the robot, but still make contact with the wheel near the center.
That's really cool. I love hearing how shortbot teams came up with the process of reaching up and over to be able to score for the control panel. Did you guys have any difficulties on this one? How did you come to your final design?
We had a number of difficulties with coming to our final design and bringing it to fruition, mostly because that we were low priority. Things like the arm and the conveyor took up a lot of real estate and time on the robot. So we had a bit of a time crunch. And so what we did is, in the beginning, we thought of a ton of different designs. So we had things like scissorless static arms, motors to flip it up. And we even debated sitting from on top of the wheel or the side. But once our team transitioned into using pneumatics this year, that kind of propelled our design to where it is now.
Yeah, that's cool. I think a lot of teams either completely eliminated or underestimated the challenges associated with the control panel challenge this year. Let's talk about the end game. How did you guys approach, those final points that you're going to score in teleop? How did you approach climbing this year?
So we were very proud of our climb system. We spent a really lot of time working on the system because we knew of how important it was to the challenge. And our system consists of a scissor lift that's attached to a trolley that allows us to reach the bar at any height. And the trolley system consists of a window motor that's chained up to 2 bolt rollers that wrap nicely around the bar to prevent us from falling off. And what our trolley system allows us to do is move left and right on the bar. That way, whenever we go up to climb, we can always balance it, whether it's just us or if we're with another team. Our trolley system is then pulled down by 2 straps attached to a winch system that has a piston ratchet to keep us at a stable height while climbing. This basically allows us to, every time we pull up in order to keep our height on the bar, it'll lock us in. That way there's no possibility of us touching the ground. And then that winch system also takes a lot of stress off the arms, and it primarily keeps on the belt, which meant that we are actually able to have a lot of weight reduction on the arms, and it didn't need to be that stable. As long as our trolley system was stable, we were fine. So we actually practiced a lot at 303's field, and we were able to attempt a double climb there with 56. And even though their bot slid all the way down to the bar, we were still able to climb, and we balanced it out by the end of the time limit.
That's really cool. I feel like that's being able to practice with other teams, especially given the ranking point consideration, is super important. And I love that there are teams around in First Mid-Atlantic that host fields for others to play on. So I feel like one of our themes tonight with you guys is iteration. So while you guys were testing your climb, did you guys encounter any sort of issues that you had to redesign for, or what was your iteration process like on the climbing?
Yeah, so we actually broke our winch system 3 separate times while we were practicing our climb at 303's field. The first time we bent our bracket that held our winch motor, so that had to be redesigned, and we basically just buffed it up so that it wouldn't bend again. The second time, our piston ratchet snapped because it wasn't placed correctly, so we had to move a lot of the electronics on our electrical board and move the piston up a little bit. And then the last time, actually during our double climb, we never got to our bot fast enough to take it off while 56 was also taking off their bot, and that led to us sliding completely down the bar and hitting the ground, which actually bent our 80-20 holding the winch system, which we had to completely replace, and it took a lot of time to fix that.
That's a lot of changes. It sounds like you guys have, the final product being this rock solid climber that sounds super reliable and obviously battle tested. So that's cool. One thing I like about 3637 the most is the imagery and the overall, I guess, team mascot, right? You guys are the Daleks. It's a fun image to have. It's not often that teams pick, a villain from a franchise to emulate, but this is definitely an awesome one. So that being said, I'm a little curious about what you guys named the robot this year. Sean, maybe you could shed a little light on that. What did you guys name your robot and why?
Oh, of course. Our robot's name this year is Chewbacca. We thought it was a clever name. We had a bit of a brainstorming session, and the whole team voted on it. And we really love this name for a few reasons. One, it represents the competition a little bit, our sponsor, and it relates back to robotics. But 2, as we talked about, our intake had a lot of trial and error, and that meant a lot of chewing up balls. We destroyed quite a number, and so when we think of names, we're like, well, certainly can relate to that name on a few different numbers. So We thought it was just a really fun name, and it made our team laugh. We thought it'd be a competition that the Chewbacca.
Well, thank you guys, Team 3637, the Daleks, for sharing your story tonight and the deep dive on the robot. Are there any other final bits you'd like to share with the FIRST community this evening?
We'd really like to thank first our mentors and our sponsors. They really helped us out this season, and we couldn't have done it without them. And we're very excited for whatever FIRST will come up with in the future.
Where can others find more information about your team if they're interested in learning more?
Anyone can go visit www.team3637.com, and they can find more information on our team as well as our bot activities.
Wow, that's awesome. Props to the Daleks for their never quit iterative process. It sounds like they had a lot of challenges to overcome this year, and they came out stronger because of it.
Up next, we've got Team 56, Roby from Bound Brook, New Jersey. All right, welcome to our segment with Team 56, Roby. I've got Evie and Jenna, of course, mentor Mr. Houston here. So, Evie, let's hear a little bit about Team 56.
So Team 56, we have been around for 24 years. Our 25th anniversary is coming up next year. So while we're not always working with the robot, there's some different goals we achieved during and after the competition season. So one thing we do is participate in multiple outreach events where we go to show our community and even those around the hard work that we put into a robot and our team. So we have also started and run 3 STEM programs. We have the Middlesex Summer STEM Camp, Bound Brook Buddy Bot, and the Bound Brook Robot Camp, which we just started this year. So we have started 3 official FLL teams. We have 2 which are in our Bound Brook community, and 1 that is in South Bound Brook that are mentored by our Team 56 mentors. So we have also hosted 3 official FLL tournaments here at our high school. We also mentored international FRC teams 6200 from Juarez, Mexico, and 1144 from San Lorenzo, Puerto Rico, with weekly and monthly video calls. We also have weekly safety presentations at the beginning of the meetings presented by our safety team. So our safety teams will show us about a 20 to 30 minute presentation on different topics each week. So all of our safety team members take a CPR training and become certified before competition. So this is so that everyone, and also we teach other people on the team what happens in each situation if something goes wrong. From all of our hard work from the season and from the robot has made who we are today and makes us proud to be Team 56.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you guys cover a lot of bases and keep yourselves very busy. I also like the focus on safety, right? You can never underestimate the importance of a subject matter just like that. So Jenna, I'd love to hear more about what your team does right after the new year, like as you're gearing up for competition season or for build season. What is 56? What kind of motions does Team 56 go through?
To start off the new year with the new members of the team, we would run 2 meetings a week just to kind of introduce the new members to our team and get them motivated to keep on coming. We want to get them interested in what we do. So one of the meetings every week would be focused around engineering. We would also talk about all the different tools. For another week, we would go through everything to kind of introduce it. So when we bring the new students to our build area, we usually introduce that when it gets closer to the kickoff. That kind of gets them more prepared for the kickoff, and so they're not shy to ask questions. For example, one meeting, a mentor would bring a box of different types of motors, and as a team, the returnees would explain how the motors would work and what type of situation you would use for certain motors. Then on one day, we would go over pneumatics. We would also do hands-on activities that would help the team bond and have fun.
I feel like that preseason bonding is so important, especially when it comes to obviously learning how robots come together, but just in general sort of forming what you guys are like as a team and your culture. So I hear, Jenna, that you guys have a pretty fun kickoff weekend. Tell me a little bit about that.
On the Friday before kickoff, Team 56 would host an overnight sleepover activity at the high school. We would do team building exercises, and everyone would bring their Xboxes or Switches and would host one big game of Smash Brothers. We would also host a very big Nerf battle game throughout the team. It was always a blast to attend these sleepovers because it gave everyone an opportunity to get closer and better our quote unquote family bond. So, getting into kickoff on that Saturday, we would sit down as a team and look back at previous years of FRC games. And we would do a kind of like a demo discussion about the game, pretending it was this year's game that was coming out. We always want to include the whole team in this exercise because we want our robot to come together with everyone's ideas. This would help the people who would not normally work on the robot have a somewhat of a game plan on how this year's robot would go, and it would give the freshmen a good understanding of how the game usually works, and it will get them prepared to properly start prototyping. Throughout the groups, we would show the game video and we would all have to come up with a list of priorities. And we would present it to the rest of the team. We would go through why it is essential to the game and why it would be a good idea to use during the season. Once each group has gone, we would take the top 3 of all the group's top 3 and talk more on how it would help the robot and why it would better our chances of advancing in the game. Then once the kickoff video is revealed, we would all eat pizza and do the same thing with this year's robot.
Cool. Yeah, Evie, that seems like an interesting approach, right? I like the idea that you guys put a lot of effort into bringing the team together as a cohesive unit before you're about to embark on this super big challenge that everybody has to tackle each year. So, Evie, let me ask you, you've moved through the kickoff weekend and the game has been revealed. You guys know what you need to do and what kind of game your robot needs to play. Where do you guys go from there?
So once the game is revealed to us, our team will sit down and start coming up with rough sketches on how we might want to have a robot to look. During this process, we make sure that the whole team agrees on what we are creating, even if they're not on the robot development sub-team. We will then start putting a piece together, such as old parts from past robots onto our last year's robot, which is still functioning. For example, the idea of the color wheel. We attached the wheels to our last year's robot's crossbow, which worked great. We learned from this the best approach and the placement of the wheel.
That's awesome. I love the idea of prototyping with what you've got in the shop, right? If the robot already works and it's from last year, it's all wired up, why not start putting stuff on it? So Evie, let's dive in a little bit to this year's robot. What'd you guys come up with?
Okay, so for this year, our 2020 robot, we decided to go for our smaller height robot. So I'm gonna start with the intake. We have a long roller on the front that can pick up balls from all angles. It is the whole width of the robot, not just one ball width. This is something that not all robots do. So we saw that every robot has it just picks up the same width of the ball. This one, ours, we decided it can go from any angle, it can pick up as many as it needs in one shot. So once the balls that are in the robot, they travel up the conveyor belt, which are the orange belts. The balls will fall down into a trough to where they will turn into a shooter. The transfer from the power conveyor belt to the shooter is gravity fed, which is not powered. This is the purpose that making it gravity fed means we do not have to worry about the gaps between the balls coming up the conveyor belt, which we found the balls squeeze in every little tight crevice they can find. So next it will go to the shooter. So the shooter is made from a 4-inch dowel wheel next to each other. We found that having the 2 wheels makes our shoots more accurate. It adds mass to the flywheel and reduces errors if the balls don't come in perfectly. So now moving on to our climb. We have an arm which is on the side of the robot in which is held down by an air cylinder. Once the air cylinder is pulled in, the arms will pop up since it is on a loaded spring. Once the robot is in position, we have a bigger cylinder which is attached to the arm. At the end of the cylinder, there is a semi-big hook which is attached by a small zip tie. The idea of this is when we go to climb, the cylinder will extend to the hook on the bar, onto the bar. Once the hook is on the bar, the air cylinder will come back down, having a lot more force than normal, making the zip tie break. The hook has a 1/2 inch wide nylon strap that is which is also attached to the winch. The winch is located closer to the back of the robot. We decided to go with this because most of our weight is on the back of the robot, not in the front, so we wouldn't have as many problems. So once the hook is on the bar, the winch will wind up the wide nylon strap until the robot is no longer touching the ground. Lastly, we have our color wheel. So as I talked previously, our color wheel, it has two complex wheels that are stacked together. They are placed at the top of the arm in the upper corner. So when we come to the color wheel, we'll pull our arm in and then have the operator control the wheel to however many rotations we need. We also have a standard USB camera, which we use to help find the correct color that we are given. We also use that camera for when we are shooting.
Wow, that's awesome. You guys definitely took on all of the game challenges, and it looks like you came up with some great solutions there. I'm excited to see this robot in action if and when it happens, right? Hopefully it does. Fingers crossed. Evie, let me ask you, it seems like you guys are really integrated into the community. Is there anything special you guys do to unveil the robot to the general public once it's ready to be shown?
Okay, so every year after we have revealed the robot, we will have our annual robot reveal, which is at our Bound High School, which is always open to the public, and we even make videos for it. So this is to show like what our team does and how it's run and what we have set up and what our team like does. Then lastly, we'll show off our robot, how it works, and we'll then go travel to the cafeteria and we'll let people drive the robot. We'll show how it shoots or whatever the game is that year. But we would also have some of our other sub teams stationed around like safety, team development, outreach, strategic planning, and everything else.
That's a really special way to involve your community, right? I mean, when you think about it, first teams are so influenced by the community around them, whether it's sponsorships or school support, that being able to sort of say thank you and show what you finished off with is really awesome. Well, Team 56 Roby, thank you so much. Evie and Jenna, and of course, Mr. Houston, we appreciate your time tonight. If I want to learn more about your team, where can I find you online?
You could go on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Our username is FRC Team 56.
Simple enough. Thank you guys so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the look into your season and your robot. I'm a little jealous of all the team bonding activities. Sign me up for game night next time.
All right, next up on our lineup is Team 1218 SCH Vulcan Robotics out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All right, so we're here with Team 1218 SCH Vulcan Robotics out of Chestnut Hill, Pennsylvania. I'm here with Julia, Dominique, Vicky, Abby, and their mentor, Eileen. So with that, Dominique, I'll hand it over to you. Let's learn a little bit more about 1218.
Hi, so I'm Dominique, and I'm a senior on SCH Vulcan Robotics. And after 4 years in FRC, I think what I've found most unique to our team is our prioritization of team dynamics. So before taking a look at the details of our robot, we really want to emphasize how collaboration and student leadership above all has allowed us to thrive. So we are really proud that our students are the ones who are building, designing, and programming everything that goes into our robot. And to have effective management and communication as students, we've created a structured team organization. So this consists of captains, who are 2 senior leaders, and 2 underclassmen, as well as 9 sub-teams with specific responsibilities and student leadership. We also have the support of our 6 mentors who guide us with their expertise in various fields. So the clips that you're viewing now are of everyday build nights, but what I really love is how they display the collaborative atmosphere on our team. Senior programmers are teaching underclassmen, Mentors are watching students on machinery, and everyone's just working together towards our collective goal. We also wanted to note that as a co-ed team, we have 40% female representation and 75% of leadership positions are held by girls. And I think the fact that we have 4 girls interviewing tonight speaks to our growth in diversity.
Yeah, for sure. That's a huge strength in leadership, especially on co-ed teams. I love to see that. So, Vicky, why don't you talk a little bit about your team's process?
So, hi, I'm Vicky. I'm a junior and a co-head of mechanical, and I'm going to talk about that design process. From kickoff to mid-competition season, we always use the phrase yes and to add to ideas of our peers rather than dismissing them. With everyone having their ideas acknowledged, we foster an environment of cooperation and good vibes. This ideology is also how we identify our objectives for our robot every year.
Yeah, hi, I'm Julia. I'm a junior. And just to add on to that, we try to figure out our goals in terms of strategy for building really early on in the season. So one of the first things we do is we require every one of our members to read and understand the rules. Read the rules, maybe understanding them comes a little later, but definitely read the manual on the day of kickoff. And this year, it actually resulted in us deciding that it would be way more advantageous to design a taller robot that shoots the long shot. So the area from the control panel to the loading station, as opposed to a shorter robot that can pass through the trench, but with a less reliable shot. So from there, we started identifying other goals we wanted to have on the robot. So that includes a turret, a tracking shot from our shooter, a 6-ball auton, and a robust intake that's really easy to operate.
So within our mechanical and cab sub-teams, we split into subsystems led by upperclassmen that cover the whole robot. With Autodesk Fusion 360 as our CAD software, multiple students can be designing mechanisms simultaneously and they can all be inserted into the full assembly of the robot.
Yeah, so this cooperative CAD system really helps us to create a modular design for a robot. So we understand that to be each mechanism on a robot being easily repairable in its own unit. And this actually really came in handy during quarterfinals at HAPRO because our intake broke when our driver, slammed into a wall. But because of our modular design, we were really easily able to swap that out. And with the extra weeks of bag this year, having that modular emphasis meant that we could continuously improve on our designs.
Nice. Yeah, I think modular design is clutch if you know how to do it well. With that, let's dive into the robot itself. So Julia, let's start at the bottom. Tell us a little bit about your drive base.
Yeah, so this year we saw a return to the 1218 swerve drive. And this has been a project of over a couple of months. So during this off season, we were working on building modules, designing modules, and creating practice code for a dummy chassis that we finished in December. And looking at this season's game, we thought that the maneuverability of a swerve drive would be really advantageous because we determined this to be a really evasion-focused game, especially at the higher echelons of competition, which a swerve is good at inherently because of the way that it operates. We also thought that this would be a cycle time game, and that led us to picking the tallbot and then led us to picking the swerve because if we're tall, we might as well be maneuverable. As Abby's going to elaborate upon, we encountered a couple challenges due to lack of student experience, but we really do love the final chassis. Unfortunately, due to the nature of a swerve being an 8-motored beast, we had a couple more motors than were allowed in the rules.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. I'm Abby, by the way. I'm a senior in programming and electrical. And it seems a common theme with teams now to have more motors than the number of PDP ports there are. And the way our team solved that problem is by wiring 2 bag motors downstream to 1 Talon controller, which is allowed in the rules and made us really happy because with that, we can identify mechanisms that will either always run together or never run together. But in the end, we made really good use of all the resources that FIRST provided us through the WPI libraries and software. For example, we used the Pathweaver app to plan really successful autons. And then we used resources from other teams and on Chief Delphi as well.
Yeah, for sure. You got to make the most of what you got. And I know the bag motor trick was huge when people found it in the manual. Like you said, the PDP slots were the biggest design challenge electrically this year for sure. So let's keep going from the ground up. Julia and Vicky, why don't you tell me about the intake and the tower?
Yeah, so starting with the intake this year is a product of continuous iterative design. And like I said, a really growing emphasis on our team to develop that modular design. So learning from last year with last 2 years with our past two robots, we noticed that they both had intakes that were very difficult to replace. So the intake this year was designed in a way that is super replaceable with the removal of just one hex shaft and a couple bolts. We also really wanted to prioritize a touch it, own it style intake, which was actually modeled after 973, the Graybot's 2012 robot, since we felt that our 2019 robot took a little too much time to pick up cargo. So because of our infinity belt system, the intake can pick up power cells from tapping them anywhere on any side of the intake. As you can see in the videos, we started using yellow belts for our entire intake mechanism. Later in the season, we changed out some of the belts for a sturdier style, but we kept the horizontal infinity belts because we liked how well it brought the game pieces into the tower.
So our tower system has gone through many prototypes, ranging from using compliant wheels to bare hex shafts to manipulate the power cells and bring them up to our shooter. Ultimately, we used a hex shaft with Delrin plugs on each side with a red plastic tube covering it. These rollers would turn our orange belts, which brought our power cells to the top of the tower. One challenge we ran into was the rollers buckling in the center from the pressure of the tight belts, but with our previously mentioned modular design system, we were easily able to check the vibes of each individual system, so the rollers were easily removed and the Delrin plugs to support the center of them were machined. Our swerve modules also take up a large amount of space on our drivetrains, so we added polycarb sheets to one of the sides of the tower and zip tied some more lightweight electronic components to it.
I'm a little curious about the firepower this robot is packing. So maybe, Abby, you can talk a little bit about the shooter.
Totally. Yeah, so our shooter prototyping started by actually looking back to the shooter bot that we made in 2012. So that was the basketball game. And as the video clip shows, we actually shoved power cells into that bot and made it shoot out of them. And that totally worked. Actually, it was the day right on kickoff. So it was nice going into that we know we have robots and mechanisms that can make the long shot. And on our shooter, it has one motor that changes its turn or yaw angle, one servo that changes the pitch of the hood with a lead screw, and then one flywheel that's powered by a Neo. And this allows for a very large range of shooting positions from the auton line all the way back to the back of the control panel. And it allows us to execute our strategy of being able to shoot behind the control panel. A little more on the programming side of things, the tower is fully automated with a Limelight. Last year, we used the Limelight to do a simple auto docking routine to the rocket. And then we used that experience this year to create an auto aim program that will quickly turn and pitch the turret to center on the target and even correct for the parallax between the inner and outer ports in order to make that center shot right on. And the Limelight also uses trigonometry to determine the robot's distance from the target. So we're less dependent on gyros or odometry that will shift over time. And it applies an adjusted velocity to the shot.
Very cool. I always love hearing about shot automation because I feel like with this, how big the goal was this year, just about any mechanism could get the power cell into the outer port, but that inner port turned into a software problem. So I think that's pretty cool. So Dominique, we've got a couple mechanisms left. We know how power cells are getting across the field, but what about the climb? What about endgame?
Yeah, so when it came to designing our climbing mechanism, one thing we knew really early on is that we wanted the ability to adjust our position on the bar. And our goal in that is to be compatible with any other climb mechanism so we can always get the ranking point when climbing with another team. And this is similar to our 2018 design when our climb had a string that allowed us to move away from the bar so another team can climb. The coolest part of the prototyping process for me personally was definitely coming up with our contoured roller design. And so we initially used tape to create curves on two sets of hex spacers to roll along the bar, but found we too easily fell off the bar. And that's when we came up with the idea for rolling wheels that fit the curve of the bar. We used Ninja Flex, which is a 3D printer filament that added to the grippiness of the rollers. And this special filament meant that it actually took 23 hours to print a single roller, which made it a really unique feature of our robot. The climb is driven by a winch with a software automated pneumatic brake to pull our robot up and down on the bar. And the robustness of this climb was shown when we had a triple climb in our first match of the season and then continued climbing consistently in our matches during Hatboro.
Nice. Yeah, I think you guys are right on with trying to make your end game as compatible as possible with any of your team members, right? Let's talk about the control panel, a small area that a lot of teams have decided not to pay too much attention to. I'm curious how you guys approached that challenge.
Yeah, so our control panel manipulator was actually designed by an underclassman preparing to take on leadership in the upcoming years. And we were very excited to activate stage 2 during qualification rounds at Hatboro Horsham, which was the only time it was done at the competition. And the mechanism we created was pneumatically actuated and had a rev color sensor to fully automate both stage 2 and stage 3.
Very cool, perhaps. So Dominique and Abby, let's talk a little bit about strategy and scouting.
Awesome. So on 1218, one of the things we are proudest of is our scouting. We collect 3 different types of data, each serving a different purpose when determining match strategy and alliance selections. So before every competition, our strategy team analyzes every robot qualitatively in a Google spreadsheet. And this involves watching match videos or even looking at social media and build season vlogs during early weeks of competition. And this gives us a sense of which competitors are standing out at an event. We also have pit scouting teams that work at competitions, and their goal is to understand each team's physical design of their mechanisms, as well as the team's preferences for match play. So we want to know where a team wants to be scoring from, starting in Auton, etc.
And then finally, our most advanced scouting is in our own Python scouting apps and then Tableau, because scouts will use our scouting app to record every robot's performance in a competition and then record very detailed quantitative as well as qualitative data. And then this data is then compiled into Tableau files that will be handed off to our strategy sub-team to show team performances.
Props to you guys on that for sure. Let me ask you, you guys have had an opportunity to compete at Hatboro, which a lot of us have not. I'm curious, Dominique, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've learned from your experiences in competition this year.
So we were really fortunate to be able to compete as a team this year. And because of this, we also wanted to highlight some of the improvements we were working on after the Hatboro competition. As we've mentioned, we focused on specializing, cycling power cells from the loading station to shooting from behind the control panel, essentially having a niche role on an alliance while also being able to do everything on the field. And in the orientation we'd created the robot, we could even be scoring from this location while also spinning the control panel, which we hoped would become essential by district champs or worlds.
Yeah, and then to add on to that, a little bit on the programming side of things, after Hatboro, we tried to even more fine-tune our calibrated shot from behind the control panel, and then having a calibrated shot is also having like a set point shot that doesn't depend on the limelight, because our limelight ran into problems with calibration on the field and also with like shooting from the practice field, because not all of the practice fields would be set up in the same way as the actual field. That's something we learned the hard way. And then as you can see from the videos, consistency in shooting power cells was definitely improving mid-March. And then we also had been pleasantly surprised by the fact that our shots remained consistent even when we were being shoved by defense at Hatboro. And so we wanted to improve that accuracy further by having the turret adjust for the robot's movement relative to the target. And then we also wanted to improve the consistency and try to reach for that 6-ball auto, because we had been scoring up to 5 power cells in Auton at Hatboro.
Yeah, and on the more mechanical side, we definitely sped up our intake a lot since its speed really slowed us down at Hatboro. Our climb also had originally been released by unwinding a winch to release tension, and then we would climb up that way. And it worked really well because we were climbing consistently, but it was slower. So we kept the winch in order to bring our robot up onto the bar, but adjusted our design so that the hook would shoot up quickly through the use of our Vulcan springs.
So to wrap things up, 1218 would like to thank our sponsors for helping us create our 2020 robot. We are so grateful that they were able to contribute not only financially, but also through materials, machinery, and mentorship. We would also like to thank our school, Spring Star Chestnut Hill Academy, for their continuous and unwavering support of our engineering and robotics program.
Well, thank you guys so much, Dominique, Abby, Julia, and Vicky, for the deep dive into the robot, and Mentor Eileen for supervising, of course. Thank you guys, and we appreciate you coming on tonight.
Wow, that's cool. Another team, 1218, joining up into the Swerve Drive Revolution that is coming over FMA this year.
And our final team of the night, Team 1676, the Pascack Pioneers from Montvale, New Jersey. We're here with Team 1676, the Pascack Pioneers. I've got Ava, Ethan, and Luke, and of course their mentor, Mr. Killian. Ava, we're going to start with you. Introduce us to Team 1676.
Hi, I'm Ava. I'm the co-CEO and co-mechanical lead of the Pascack Pioneers. So to give a little bit of background on us, we have a team of around 85 kids, and it's currently our 16th year. We'd like to place emphasis on our non-robot focuses as well as our mechanical side, and we find that it creates a well-rounded and cohesive team. In the fall, we have preseason training, and something exciting we did this year was hosting a STEAM fair to introduce kids in the community to all aspects of STEAM. We also host an FLL tournament for nearby teams. In addition, something really special we do is that every student on our team is required to join one of 5 project groups, which are community outreach, international team outreach, first mentoring, adaptive physical education, which is a group dedicated to constructing a robot that allows students in an adaptive physical education class to experience kicking a soccer ball, and Ready, Set, Speak, which is a website created by the Pioneers that helps kids affected by autism or apraxia learn how to properly pronounce words by following the Pioneer. We found that requiring all kids to be on a project group makes everyone be highly involved with every aspect of our team.
Wow, nice. That's cool. I appreciate the strong emphasis on keeping everyone well-rounded, and I think that probably breeds a huge amount of pride in the success of the team on all fronts, right? Which is probably super rewarding as a student on the Pioneers. But with that, one thing that I want to learn more about is the Pascack Pioneers robot for this year. So Ethan, maybe you can give us an intro on this year's machine.
Yeah, so after the game is revealed every year, we spend the first 2 days of our season in larger team meetings. During the first few days, we end up setting the tone for the rest of our season, and we decide on our priorities and discuss potential mechanisms. We first decided on building a taller robot, that way we weren't constrained by our height. We thought that more competitive teams would decide to use the trench, so we wouldn't be losing a path to score anyhow. We also decided we wanted to intake and shoot in opposite directions to optimize our auto and for faster cycle times. This was similar to Team 341 Miss Daisy and how they built their robot in 2012. Our number one priority for this year's robot was to score in the high goal and to minimize our cycle time because it would be the only way for us to consistently score points outside of the end game. Climbing was our second priority, but it was something that always needed to make it onto the robot no matter how simple it was because of the large number of points that it earned. While our goal was able to complete all aspects of the game and not to be forced to rely on other alliance members for anything, we decided that the control panel was our lowest priority because it would be simple for us to integrate later. With our goals set in the first 2 days, we split everyone up into their subteams and begin to prototype and design the robot.
Very cool. So let's take a deep dive from the ground up. Luke, let's start with the chassis.
Yeah, so this year's chassis is the first fully welded chassis in team history. We are using West Coast drive with 4 Neos, 2 on each side. We are running 2-speed Andy Mark Evo shifters with a high speed of 13 feet per second and a low speed which is about 6 feet per second. That's right, you heard me correctly. We are running a West Coast drive with Andy Mark Evos. Due to our past luck and love of Andy Mark products, we wanted to stick with them. Students worked over the summer to make custom pieces that would be able to run our chassis just the way we want it. Our robot drives on 8 wheels with the center forward dropped for better balance. We're using 6-inch Coulsons, which we decided to go with because we wanted to always be balanced while shooting and wanted better traction to withstand defense from other teams. They also have better traction for driving through the rendezvous point. This year's chassis also has a full belly pan. We place a sheet of corrugated plastic under the chassis to prevent balls from getting into the robot and to give electrical more space to mount onto. This light but strong guard turned out to be very helpful with spacing issues. The picture of the CAD shown on the screen is from an early version of the chassis.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate the brand loyalty in terms of your products that go onto your robot, and it sounds like an interesting twist on somewhat simple engineering challenge that you guys took on. So props to you guys. Ava, let's talk a little bit about game piece manipulation. Can you tell us more about the intake and maybe some of the paths or the travel that the ball went through once it gets on board?
Yeah, so we have a retractable intake that is deployed using pistons. We also have a funneling system that centers the ball, which was inspired by Team 1885, 3847, and 6135's 2020 prototypes. Going into building the intake, we knew that we wanted to have something wide that could take in multiple balls at once, and something that would center the power cells. Initially, we used a single axle with vectored wheels, but we experienced jamming because the balls would get stuck on each other in the center. We moved on to 2 axles, one with normal wheels, one with vectored, and a Lexan shield, but it still jammed. What we ended up with was a dual axle system with no vectored wheels. However, we replaced this centering system with a polycord funnel that has 2 sides that run at slightly different speeds, which centers all of the balls in a single file line to head into the travel system.
So let's talk a little bit about that ball travel.
Yeah, so we ended up with a polycord and poly belt mechanism that had an upper and lower stage and allowed us to fit and store 5 balls and feed them quickly to our shooter. It also uses sensors to space the balls evenly, which was really important to prevent jamming. We had 2 prototypes going for this mechanism. One was an octagonal hopper with a helix-shaped ramp inside, and an axle with surgical tubing that hits the ball up the ramp. This was inspired by Team 1717's helical hopper from the Lunacy game. It reduced jamming issues, but it minimized electrical access and changed our weight distribution, which was a big issue with Climber, and that was a higher priority. It also made us have an off-center shooter, which we didn't want for driving. Our other prototype, made out of polycord, was centered and made it easy to know the location of the ball. This is inspired by Team 1676's polycord elevator from the Rebound Rumble game. After deciding on the polycord system, we did some fine-tuning with sensors and motor adjustments until we could space all of the balls with no jamming, which we were really happy with.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like you guys know where to go to find past mechanisms that work. I also appreciate that you were inspired mostly, or not mostly, I would appreciate the most that you're inspired by a previous PASCAC robot, right? So you guys know what works and you decided to use it. So that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about delivery system. How are you getting the game pieces to the goal now that they're organized and on board?
Yeah, so what we love most about our current shooter is how highly adjustable it is because we can change speeds and hood position. It allows us to shoot from the target zone, initiation line, the front, and the back of the trench run. We tested with Coulson wheels at first, then decided to add flywheels to increase our moment of inertia. This keeps our speed stable, which allows us to do rapid shooting without losing speed, therefore making us highly accurate and highly efficient. Next, we tested the adjustable hood, which was inspired by Team 254's 2-position shooter in 2012 during the Rebound Rumble game. We were really grateful for our laser cutter during all of this prototyping because it allowed us to make wooden prototypes and fine adjustments without worrying about dealing with metal. All of this fine adjustment led to the highly accurate shooter that we ended up with.
Yeah, I know the faster you can get iterations through, the faster you can arrive at the solution that you actually want. So definitely helps out a lot during the build season process. So let's talk about that higher priority, right? That climb. Luke, let's dive into that mechanism.
So as Ethan said before, climbing was one of our top priorities. After looking at a few different designs, we decided to go with something inspired by a past 1676 robot climber. Our climber uses a flat torsion spring deployment, which is released by a gate latch. A winch operated by a Neo motor with a 63-to-1 gearbox pulls the Delrin slider down the 80-20 extrusion to retract after connecting onto the shield generator. This climber mechanism was designed so that each arm can retract separately to better our weight distribution to help balance a triple climb.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, reliability is key here, right? And I think you guys have something that's both reliable, or at least it seems very reliable, and it seems like the deployment and the overall process of use is super quick, which is awesome when it comes to end game mechanisms like climbers. So well done. Ethan, let's talk about some software. What kind of auto and programming attributes went into this year's robot?
So this year we decided that we wanted to have 3 different autos, that way we could be flexible with our strategy in any given match. We wanted our first auto to be one where we would shoot 3 balls that we had at the beginning, and then moved on to grab the 3 that were in our alliance's trench and shot them. Our second auto was a 5-ball auto, where we would grab the 2 balls in the opposing alliance's trench, and then we'd move on to shoot all 5. It was important for us to grab the 2 balls before shooting. That way we could avoid any penalties that could have come from a team that may have been trying to get them on the opposing alliance. We also wanted a simple auto where we could shoot the 3 balls that we started with from the starting line and then drive off of it in order to be effective in auto where our alliance members may be stronger than us and might get in the way of our typical autos. Besides for auto, our programming team worked really hard this year using time of flight sensors to automate our travel mechanism and create smooth transitions between mechanisms as balls are collected. We also automated processes like shooting so that a single press of a button could fully unload the robot. In order to have the most accurate shots possible, we used the Limelight camera to auto-align with the goal and PID to keep our shots consistent. Programming was by far one of this year's greatest challenges due to the requirement of many of our mechanisms to be automated.
Yeah, that can definitely be a struggle, right? The mechanical team can build absolutely anything and make it really awesome, but to truly add that optimization, that automation, you need a really strong programming team, which it sounds like you guys have. Well, guys, we really appreciate the deep dive into the robot. I'm so excited to see it and to learn more about it. But you guys also have your reveal video prepared for us, and I want to check that out while I hear all the last little stories about this year's robot.
We dedicated this season to our mentor, Thomas Gilbert, who had 2 grandchildren on our team and continued to mentor us once they graduated, which we will always be grateful for. As you can see during all of these close-ups in our video, most of our parts are made by hand. This is something really unique to the Pioneers because a lot of advanced teams have parts fabricated and machined, but almost all of our pieces are made by hand by the students. Our only exceptions are our shooter plates and chassis rails and welding, because those were really precise pieces that we wanted to have machined.
Yeah, but this year we also got to make use of laser cutting and 3D printed parts, which were some really awesome things for us in prototyping and in our final robot. As you can see on the robot in the reveal video, there's a lot of yellow plastic parts, which we 3D printed this year, and it was really awesome to be able to make our own custom pieces. You'll also be able to see in the video that our robot can climb with the 2 independent arms moving at different speeds. That's also going to help us be able to balance during different times in the matches where we want to get that balance ranking point. You can also see that we spin the wheel of Jeopardy while shooting, and that's actually a possibility for us. We wanted to build that into our strategy.
No, that's really cool. I love the idea of thinking through your gameplay strategy far enough ahead that you're trying to think about simultaneous action. So I like that you guys planned in the fact that you're going to want to potentially spin the color wheel while you're taking your shot. That's really smart. Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing your robot and your stories of the season this year with us, Team 1676, the PASCAC Pioneers. If I want to learn more about your team, where can I find you online?
So you can check us out on social media here.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we hope we see you very soon. Thank you to the Pioneers. We really appreciate the dive on the robot and also a chance to take a look at your reveal video. Well, that'll do it for our Week 5 segments here on FMA Plus. We appreciate you watching and hanging out in chat. Please make sure you stay tuned for our live Q&A post show. Keep submitting, and we'll see you next week on FMA Plus. All right, we are here with Team 1218. Welcome back, Jeff, and of course the team. Jeff, tell me a little about 1218 tonight. Who do you have here?
Yeah, so from 1218, we have Dominique, Julia, and Abby, and their mentor Eileen is sitting in as well. we've heard so much about your team and your robot, but we are interested in asking a few more questions as part of our live Q&A. So for everybody who's viewing the Q&A right now, remember to keep posting your questions in chat, as we'll be picking out more during the Q&A as it goes on. So with that, I'll tee it off to you, Libby. Why don't you go ahead and ask the first question on our list?
All right, so this one's sort of came from the FMA Plus crew, but it's been interesting. Lots of teams have jumped into the Swerve Drive game this year, but you guys have done Swerve in years past. How do you think that helped out in Infinite Recharge? What lessons did you guys learn in past years that you're thankful you didn't have to encounter for the first time?
Yeah, so this year has been a little interesting. Like I mentioned in the interview, we have used Swerve before. I think that like the key difference between this year and our last year we did it, which was I think Steamworks, was this year we went with like a more simple 1-speed Swerve drive. Last year we tried to do like a more complex like shifting moment, and it ended up with a couple broken parts, and our robot actually didn't drive for a couple matches. So we came into it with like, I guess, more of like the long game in mind. So we designed our drive base for accessibility in case anything broke. We had a spare module always ready. In terms of like strategy with this game, I really enjoy driving it on the field. I think that the ability to kind of like feign around defense and just move really quickly in any direction and spin wherever, especially with our turret shooter, was awesome for such a maneuverable game.
Yeah, and to add on to that, on the programming side, it is really good to have legacy code to be able to look back at. We did use a lot more of what First and WPI Live provided us with this year, because in the previous year, Auton and like driving in general didn't go that smoothly programming wise.
Nice. So you guys actually pulled from previous year's code, like you said, and you're able to improve with better resources. That's awesome. All right. So next question on the list. How did winning the Detroit Championship in 2019 impact your approach to build season in 2020?
I mean, like, it felt really awesome. We were really excited to be a part of that alliance. Shout out to all of our partners there. I think more than anything, we wanted to take what we had learned strategically, because we were really grateful that even as a fourth robot on that alliance, we were able to help input, giving opinions about what robot to defend on a match and stuff like that. So we brought a lot of that back in and just beefed it up even more. So yeah, that's what I think we focused on most, that we had learned at that event to take to the next steps.
Yeah, the Einstein journey for all four teams is such an incredible learning experience, and so I know there's a lot you can take from that. Been there, and it's truly, at least for our team, it changed the process. So it's good to hear you guys also sort of brought those lessons home. So this one's a little more specifically technical. What kind of 3D printer do you guys use? You talked about the NinjaFlex filament with. Why NinjaFlex as opposed to other filaments?
So the 3D printers we're using are just normal MakerBots, as far as I'm concerned. We have a couple in our lab. The filament that we were using specifically, we play with a lot of filaments in the lab. We do classes with 3D printing, so it's just happening all the time. But in terms of the NinjaFlex, the big difference with that was that it was just much more grippy. It had a little more flex to it, so it wasn't rigid like a normal plastic filament. And that let us, the contour of the rollers that we created actually went in a little more deep. So it went in so that it would literally grab all the way around the robot and just, grab all the way around the bar and really hold it sturdy.
Nice. Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question for that I just thought of in regards to the NinjaFlex, using it as a roller. How did you guys how did those rollers fare in terms of like wear and durability? Were they durable? Did they break down? Were they replaceable?
We actually didn't experience a lot of wear and tear. We practiced climbing at 103's lab, and their bar was a little rustier, so it had a couple of little rust patches on it from there. But at the end of the competition, we really didn't notice a lot of problems there. It was a little smoother because of just friction from climbing on the bar, but Dom, do you have something you want to add?
I mean, yeah, the other thing is if we did need to replace it, we had an entire spare climb hook ready to go with other Ninja Flex. So while we didn't see that was an issue, the modular design being able to really replace that quickly, we were prepared, worst case scenario.
Yeah, spares are so key, especially when you're trying something new. You don't want it to break and then be like, oh no, we don't have any more of those. They're all at home.
Well, that's like the rule with spares, right? Like they don't matter until they do, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Spares are a waste of time until they're absolutely not a waste of your time. So this question is from chat, and it's specifically from Julia, but I'm sure Jeff and I were both drive coaches, so we're interested to see what this is like too. What was your biggest challenge driving in the Infinite Recharge year?
Okay. So I guess the main thing was I learned to drive on a tank, and my only experience ever driving Swerve was visiting 103's lab and having some fun over there this summer. So like, first things first, I needed to learn an entirely new way of driving. And I think, so in our lab, we have a half field, but it's not the correct orientation for this game. So I didn't have a lot of time to like practice on the field. So like literally just like taking my experience knowing how to move the robot and applying that onto a field I hadn't ever really driven on was definitely difficult, but it was like super fun.
Oh yeah, I have something to add to that as the operator during Hatboro. When we were driving on the field, it was so hard for our team to see like our intake because of sightlines and stuff. We didn't have a vision camera at that point. We only had the limelight, which you can't see through that. So as operator, it was hard to like make sure that you're actually lining up with the power cell if you're like all the way over at the other end of the court.
Wow, cool. Yeah, I didn't realize you guys were the driver operator for Hepro. That's cool. So let me ask either one of you a follow-up question. Another one, we're going off script here a little bit. One of the questions that the drive teams that I've worked with preparing for this game, never actually getting a chance to compete in, some of the concerns revolved around the weird angle of the bar that you climb at the end in relation to the driver stations. Was that like a big issue or a big challenge, or is that something that you didn't really need to worry about?
So I can jump in here, having coached and done strategy work for this. So I worked on a lot of those communication things.
Sure. Yeah.
Having been on the field, number one, coaches had a very hard time communicating, just getting around the obstacles in the way. That was a big challenge. So we found we had to discuss climbing a lot in pre-match strategy. Sight lines, there was usually like a logic in order where like if you were on the right side, you'd go from X position versus the middle. It'd be easier to see the farthest away. So that wasn't as big of an issue, but you wanted to make sure that you knew exactly who was going from where, how you were even approaching the bar, when you were approaching the bar, when you were deciding to climb, even if somebody wasn't on, like all of those little details we worked out in pre-match strategy, and sometimes it worked really successfully. Our first match, we got that triple climb. We felt really happy after that. And other times, maybe our partner wouldn't get up to climb, but we were fortunate enough with our Skywalker moving along the bar, we could still then move central and get 15 points, not ranking points. So yeah.
15 ranking points is a very OP match. Congratulations. So we had a couple of questions that came straight out of the FMA Discord. And the first one that came in from Discord was, and it's something I'm a pit organization gal myself. The question is, how do you guys keep your pit so darn pristine?
Well, I think I can answer a little bit. So if you're not familiar with how our pit looks, I assume that's a lot of people. We like to call it our Apple store because if you walk in, we have our white foam tiles on the ground, and then we have our curtains in the back. We mostly, I think it's our pit being clean is a byproduct of our just general desire to be really organized. So after we're done repairing, we like having all our tools put away. I've been told by a pit admin that our pit smells a lot like hand sanitizer, and that's just because we, especially in light of what's been going on, we really like to keep everything sanitized and organized.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I gotta say, I definitely see the similarities between the Vulcan pit and the Apple Store. Good lighting, clean lines, somewhat minimalistic when it needs to be, well presented. I like it a lot. Um, so here's the next question, and I can say I'm super interested to hear the answer to this one because of some of the feedback that we got from our pre-planning meeting group that met with you guys prior to the recording. They said that you guys had a great demeanor with your mentors, based on what they could tell from the meeting, and that it seemed super fun and exciting to be a part of. So, how does the relationship between mentors and students work for your team? Describe how that works.
So we have 6 mentors currently on our team, and they are incredible. They all have a lot of technical expertise, bringing in different components, and they work really well together. But honestly, my favorite thing is that they let the students lead our team more than anything else. So they guide us throughout the process and then step back and really let us do our thing at competitions. So we have no mentors on drive team. It's all student led. Our students are the ones in the pit for the most time at competitions. We even ran at the Ben Salem event last year. We actually had none of our typical mentors there. One had just had a kid, another was on a school trip. So we ran completely student led. We had a parent or two who were there to watch over us, of course, make sure we're okay. But it's really a student-led atmosphere, and having the mentors there helping us make that atmosphere what it is so special.
Absolutely. The dynamic between mentors and students on any team can really make or break the experience, and it's awesome to hear that you guys have such an awesome environment for everybody involved. So one of the things you guys mentioned in your segment tonight was the high ratio, not only of women on the team, but women in leadership. And we actually got 2 questions that are sort of similar, so I'm going to mash them together. And one is, what do you attribute your success to as far as increasing the amount of young women on your team? And then the other one is, do you have any sort of specific strategy to recruit and maintain women on your team? So, overall bubble, you guys are clearly making STEM inclusive for everyone, and chat would like to know your secrets.
So I guess to answer your first half of the question, our school used to be 2 separate schools, Chestnut Hill Academy and Springside School. So our robotics team started in the boys' school, and the girls' school would come and help build the robots, help design. Once our school combined in 2015, we started not only having just girls know the program existed, but also we have our own little our own first pipeline. So starting in 4th and 5th grade, girls are seeing robotics and engineering as a thing they can do, and having them come up through that, they know that this is an option once they get to high school. So we're just constantly keeping them involved. I think it's something 12.7% of our kids in our entire school are involved in robotics.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you guys not only put so much effort into trying to maybe level the scales a little bit in terms of gender equality in engineering, but you're also recognizing the benefits right away. You guys are all very well spoken. You obviously know how to lead your team, and you know how to run a team successfully. So these skill sets are only going to benefit you as you go into the future. And hopefully there are some young women coming up into the 12-18 family maybe next year that you can foster into those same roles once you move on. So props to you guys for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's it. Libby, do we have any more questions for them before we sign off?
I think that's what I got on the docs. I think we are all set.
Yeah, looks like you are correct. That's going to be it for all of our chat questions. So thank you to Team 1218 for your time today. Thank you to Julia, Abby, Dominique, and your mentor Eileen for sitting in and supervising. Don't forget to have your lead mentor, if you have not been already made a part of an FMA Plus lineup, make sure your lead mentor checks their email for information on applying to be on a future episode of FMA Plus.
Of course. And a huge thank you, of course, not just to my lovely co-host, Jeff, but to all of our entire FMA Plus crew for helping make this happen. We couldn't have done it without the whole group that is screening and interviewing teams, editing down our team features, as well as moderating chat, coordinating social media, and keeping you all informed.
All right. And with that, we'll see you next Saturday for another awesome episode of FMA Plus. Have a great night, everybody.